can't believe I almost forgot to mention this, but I am wearing a birthday gift that I received, and that is, I don't know if you can see this, it's like Brontosaurus. So it's like the three Bronte sisters as dinosaurs, and they're wearing like bonnets, and they're Brontosauruses. Like, I love it. Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here to do 2 book tags, neither of which I was actually tagged in. I know I have so many tags that I have actually been tagged in that I am excited to do and catch up with, but I just felt like doing these. I've been seeing them go around, and they are the Moody Reader book tag and the birthday book tag. The only real theme for these is that I have not been tagged in either of them, and I want to do both of them. I will put timestamps down below if you only care about one of the tags, but let's get started. So the first tag I'm going to do is the Moody Reader book tag, which was created by Brittany at Slanted Spines, and I've been seeing quite a few people do this tag. Most recently I have seen Hannah from Hannah's Books, Kazan from Always Doing, and Jocelyn from Yogi with the Book, so I will link all of their videos down below, as well as the original, of course. I also think this will be interesting because some of these answers might be a little different this year because of some things I talked about in my reading goals. Number 1 is, do you consider yourself a mood reader? And sometimes I always used to say and think that I was kind of like half and half, like half goal-oriented reader and half mood reader, but I was realizing that within the last like couple years before 2021, I had been like really doing more of the goal-focused reading, like TBRs and challenges and that kind of thing, and not really doing too much mood reading. So this year I'm basically going to the other extreme. I'm doing like all mood reading. I'm not setting any TBRs, like I'm not doing any TBR videos or anything. So I might still be participating in challenges, but I'm not like officially kind of putting out there my plans on what I'm going to read for them, so we'll see how that goes. So far I'm liking it. It is harder than I expected, probably because I got so used to like reading for challenges and things. And I think a pretty good indicator that I was getting burned out on TBRs is that the last few I did, I was not doing as well about meeting those when I'm normally pretty good about them. So I think I made a good call. We'll see how this year goes. Number 2 is, do you set TBR lists and do you stick to them? So I kind of talked about this already. I did set TBRs and I was pretty good about getting to a lot of books on those lists. When I set TBRs, it wasn't necessarily like I had to read every single book on that list, but it was kind of a way to guide my reading, which I enjoyed doing. And I was actually pretty good about picking books from those TBRs, although I think I tended to do very ambitious TBRs, and I think one of the reasons I didn't end up mood reading as much is just because I didn't have like room to. Number 3, do books affect you emotionally? Does the mood of a book rub off on you? This is funny because I actually commented on Kazan's video that it had not even occurred to me before seeing this tag that there are people who read books and are not emotionally affected by them. I'm a very emotional person and reader, and I don't think that prevents me from being like thoughtful or analytical about the books I read, but I'm definitely a reader who emotional investment is really important for me in a book. And also, does the mood of a book rub off on you? And I would say yes, although to varying degrees. Generally, I think the thing that affects me emotionally most about a book, like the feeling that I leave a book with, is usually determined by the overall tone, and especially the ending of a book. Like if something is a really like downer kind of ending, that will affect me emotionally, and I'll feel like I need to pick up something much happier or lighter. Or if like, even if a book can be very intense and emotional, if the ending is a little more hopeful or like cathartic even, that can leave me feeling a lot better than a book with like a dissatisfying or kind of depressing ending. Number 4, when you're feeling sad, what do you read, or do you not read when sad? I read pretty much all the time. That includes when I'm sad and trying to cheer myself up. And I have a few different kind of moods, like a few different kinds of books I go to. Like it depends on how sad and what kind of sad. Like for example, during the year that was 2020, I was gravitating a lot towards what I call cozy fantasy. Also, if it's like a really intense kind of sadness and I really need to pick me up, I will reread one of my comfort books, like The Blue Castle by Ella Montgomery or Cotillion by Georgette Heyer. And also there's another kind of mood I get in where if I'm really stressed or unhappy, I will read something that is pretty intense, where it's like the character's problems are so much worse than mine that it takes my mind off mine. So like maybe a really intense fantasy book, that kind of thing. Number 5, most often do you use reading to escape, to learn, or to critically reflect? Definitely all 3, often simultaneously. I can't really think of a book that was just so purely for entertainment that I didn't get anything intellectual out of it, whether that is insight about people, about relationships, about life in general, or more, I guess in a more meta sense, like helping me pinpoint as a reader things I enjoy or don't enjoy, like me really paying attention to an author's craft, the way that they can do certain things in a story. Like I always get something of that nature out of books, even if they're ones I hate. I always like take something from the experience. And likewise, I can't really think of a book that was only like purely for intellectual stimulation and that I didn't get any entertainment out of. I guess like certain nonfiction books where they're not supposed to be fun or engaging, like they're just supposed to teach you information. But in general, I read with a combination of all of those. Like I always approach books with kind of the same perspective of like some of my feelings are based on personal enjoyment, some of them are based on more concrete things, like more objective, even though you can't really be purely objective about books. So yeah, I definitely do like a combination of these, and I don't really separate out books I read into these different categories. Like there are definitely some books that lean more into one or the other, but overall I definitely read for all of these. I feel like I'm really over explaining these answers and I'm sorry. Number 6, what is a book that made you laugh out loud? And this very, very rarely happens. I just find it very hard for a book to actually make me laugh out loud. But one that recently did this was Heartbeat Braves by Pamela Sanderson. This is the first book in the Crooked Rock romance series, and I really, really enjoyed this. One of the things that I really liked was the humor. I feel like it wasn't present as much at the beginning of the book, but once you started spending more time with the characters, and especially with like their friend groups, and also the banter between the two romantic leads, I just really enjoyed some of the humor. Like some of the lines are really funny, and some of the lines are ones where like, by itself, it's not super funny, but like the context and the delivery made it hilarious, which like I'm impressed that the author can communicate delivery when it's like on a flat page, like you're not like watching somebody perform it. So yeah, like there's this one line where the guy says to like the main female character, he's like, I don't know what people have told you, but olives can go bad. And like, I don't know why, I just thought that was like the funniest thing. But anyway, really enjoyed this book, and one of the things I liked about it was the humor, which did actually make me laugh out loud. This next reaction happens much more often. Number 7 is, what is a book that has made you cry? Or if you don't cry, one that really moved you. And like Jocelyn, my fellow book crier, I know that not everyone cries when they read, but it's like hard for me to picture. Like I don't know, like I understand, and obviously I know that people don't all react the same way, but I can't really picture what it's like to experience a story that really hits you emotionally and that doesn't translate to your tear ducts. Like, just does not compute for me. I am a frequent book crier, so I had a lot of choices to pick from, but I went with 2. So one of them I just read last year, and that is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Like this one, it got me, even though I knew this story, and I still like, yeah, just like ugly crying, you know, like not just like a single tear trickling down my face. I mean like heaving sobs. Yeah, but loved the book. That's often an indicator, in fact, that I loved a book or that something is a favorite, is if it really like elicits that kind of strong emotional reaction from me. And another one is Love from A to Z by S.K.L. Lee. I love this book so much. I read this a couple years ago. It was one of my favorite books I read that year. And this one I actually noted in my review. I think there were 4 moments in this book that made me like tear up or cry. Some of them are happy or like bittersweet. I remember like at least one or two were because of Zainab's grandmother, like moments with her or like her thinking about her grandmother. And then at least one of the moments was related to Adam and his mother. Like there's this one scene of like them making potato chips or like french fries together. And like the context of that scene, it just, yeah, it broke me, but like in the best way. I love this book. Just a really perfect balance of like a sweet romance and some really thoughtfully dealt with topics and issues. Number 8, what is a book that you didn't even know how you felt about? And this one I'm kind of interpreting to be a book I had very mixed feelings about, where I can't really communicate if I would say, yes, I recommend this book, or no, I don't. And that is a recent read, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This was our Past Classics pick for, I think, February. And yeah, lots of tabs. And I think all 3 of us had very mixed feelings about this book. Like there are some aspects that are just so beautifully done. The writing is gorgeous. The setting is just fantastically described. Some of the characters are really good. Some of the themes are just very thoughtful and very touching. Like there are a few passages in this book that I feel like I'm going to think about for a really long time. But on the other hand, there are some things that are just really not great. Some of that is like, you know, period attitudes and language, and like some of that you expect from classics, except like even more so. And then some of the just like storytelling choices, like I have very mixed feelings, for example, about the way that John Steinbeck writes female characters in this book, because some of them are fantastic and are just so rich and complex and just like wonderful characters. And then some of them are very much the opposite of that. So yeah, like I have very complicated feelings about this book. I have extremely strong feelings in opposite directions. And so for that reason, I don't really know, like if somebody asked you like, okay, bottom line, would you recommend this? I'm like, Maybe? Number 9, are you more likely to read on a sunny day or a cloudy day? It doesn't really matter. I read a lot in all kinds of weather. I tend to like to read inside, so it really doesn't affect me that much, although I will say that my absolute favorite weather to read in is rainy weather. We don't get enough of it, but I love it. Number 10, do you usually set the mood when you read? Music, lights, smells, etc.? And I definitely don't usually. I tend to just read like whenever I feel like it at all times of the day, and I don't really make it like an event usually. The only things that I will sometimes like set up is like obviously, you know, make sure I have like a comfortable spot on like my bed or the couch or something. If it's cold, I'll get like a blanket. If I have like a drink or a snack, I'll make sure that's set up. So I will sometimes do things like that, but not really like I don't know, not really like aesthetic, you know, setup, just like I want a little cozy nest that does not require a lot of preparation. And finally, number 11 is, can you leap from book to book, or do you need buffer time between them? And I can leap from book to book. I, like Jocelyn said in her answer, and I think Kazan said this as well, I am a multi-reader, like I read a lot of different books at once, so even when I'm not finishing a book, I will be bouncing around between different books usually, so that doesn't bother me. And then if we're talking about actually like finishing a book and then immediately jumping into another, I can do that. Like, again, like sometimes I'll finish one of my in-progress books and then I'll finish another one pretty quickly after that, but I will usually do some kind of short activity in between. Maybe also just like sometimes updating my Goodreads, and if I have like a short review, that'll kind of like finish off that book in my mind, and then I'm ready to get into the next one, whether it's one I've already started or a new one. I will say, like, when I was younger, I used to be even more able to just like jump into a new book right away. Like, I'm pretty sure that what I would usually do is I would finish a book and I would immediately go to my bookcase or like my library books and like pick up the next one and just like jump right into that one. Okay, so that was the Moody Reader book tag. I'm going to tag, if you would like to do this, Huck from Badger Reads, Yara from Array of Reading, and Annalisa from Annalisa Ely. If you don't want to do this tag, no pressure. As Kazan says, the love is in the tag. And now I'm going to jump into the birthday book tag. This is, again, I was not tagged in it, but it was created by Antonia from Always Books, and I saw this on Alan's channel from the Library of Alexandria. I will of course link both of their videos down below, and hopefully I'm getting this up in my birthday month, which is April. We'll see if that happens. Number 1 is Birthday Cake, a book with a plot that seems cliche, but you adore it anyway. I'm going to go with the Dark Days Club, or the Lady Helen series in general by Alison Goodman. This is book 1, which is the Dark Days Club, and I think I've said this when I've talked about this series before, but I just am so impressed by how, like, the premise, as the question says, does seem kind of familiar or basic, but every element of it is done so well and just written so well that it doesn't bother me. I'm also somebody who, like, originality is not the most important thing for me in books, so maybe that's a factor, but I really do just feel like this book is so well done that even if you're tired of certain tropes, or even if certain elements are not something that like draw you to the book, you could still really enjoy it, because we have like the young woman who discovers that she has like magical powers, and the like brooding possible love interest who has to like teach her about this new like magical world and everything. So we have these very familiar elements, but they're done in a way that is just like so skillful, and I think this is a great example of how tropes are not automatically bad things. Like Lady Helen, I just love as a main character. She also, she never comes off as like not like other girls, which I think can happen a lot in these kinds of books or settings, because this is a historical fantasy as well. She doesn't look down on other women. Like, she's just such a fantastic character. I also really like the possible love interest, Lord Carlston. Like, he's like one of those rare brooding bad boys who doesn't annoy me, because he has like good reasons for being the way he is, and also his tragic backstory is not used as an excuse for him to treat the main character badly. Number 2, party guests. Your most anticipated book release for this year. I have 2. So I have one that has been on my Goodreads list since I think 2015 when it was first announced. That's how long I've been waiting for this book, and that is The Hidden Palace by Helene Becker. This is the sequel to The Golem and the Genie, which is one of my absolute favorite books. I've been waiting for this for so long. I think this is also going to take place during World War I, so that's also something that's going to be really interesting. And yeah, I just love these characters so much, and I can't wait to see how things go for them. I hope things turn out okay. Yeah, really excited about that book. And another new release I am really excited about. This is another sequel, but it's one that I haven't had to wait for as long because the first book is a pretty new release. And this book is Redemptor by Jordan E. Fuego. This is a sequel to Raybearer, which is one of my favorite books of last year. Yeah, I really can't wait for this one. I'm also interested to see what the UK cover is gonna look like, because I bought the UK cover of the first book, but that's, you know, not as important as the story itself, and I just really loved that first book, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what happens in the second one. I think it might just be a duology, I'm not actually sure. Number 3, Birthday Presents, a book that surprised you with how much you loved it. This is a series that I have talked a lot about, but I haven't mentioned it in a while, and that is Maurici by Maria Turchaninov, translated by AAPI. Now, the reason this surprised me, like, I originally had a different copy of this book. It was an ARC copy I had picked up somewhere before I knew you weren't supposed to do that, and I had almost unhauled it, I think twice. And then I would read the back of the book and I'm like, okay, this does still sound kind of interesting, but I got pretty close to getting rid of it. And then I finally read it and I adored it, and I bought a like finished copy of this and the sequel, which I read, and then I got the third book, which came out later, that I read, and yeah, I just really love this series. It's a really fascinating feminist fantasy series. Like, the premise is super interesting. I think the character development is great. I will say that the second book, so this is a really interesting series because this book is, like, this first one I would probably say is middle grade, and then the second book is a prequel, which is definitely adult. It is extremely dark and very, very hard to read at parts, but it does give some backstory on the story. Backstory on the story sounds weird, but you know what I mean. And then the third book is more of a direct sequel to this first book, but it's set a few years later. And that one I would say is more like young adult into adult. So it's a really interesting series, but I just really love it. The world building is so rich. The female-centric like magic and religious system is super interesting. I love the themes about feminism and sisterhood, and also like ordinary people still mattering and like being capable of great strength and love, and just like, yeah, really, really love this series, and it did surprise me because I almost got rid of that first book a couple times. Number 4, Happy Birthday Song, a book that certainly deserved all the hype it got. I have 2 answers again. One of them is from a few years ago, one of them is relatively recent. The first one is Circe by Madeline Miller. This book was so hyped when it came out a few years ago, and I feel like it's still like pretty popular. So this is definitely one of the most hyped books I have read since joining BookTube, and it's one of the most successful ones because I personally feel like this book lived up to all of the hype for me. I know it's not for everyone. It's very character driven. It's very like theme driven, I think, too, but those are things that I tend to love, or at least like when I enjoy the themes, I like when it's theme driven. But I really liked that focus on character and these messages and these themes and ideas that this book explored. I loved Circe as a character, and it's so funny. I really connected to her in a lot of ways, even though we're not very similar people, like in terms of life experience or anything. Like, I just really, really loved her, and I really felt for her, and she felt so human, even though she wasn't. Also, this copy I wanted to give away from my friend Raquel from Blonde with a Book, so that is also a really special memory, and just, yeah, I love that book. And then a more recent book that really lived up to the hype for me is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Yeah, I thought this was brilliant. I don't read a lot of horror. This is Gothic horror, and I just thought this was incredible. This is, I feel like, the first, like the most like mainstream popular of Silvia Moreno Garcia's books, which I'm happy about because I've enjoyed her books for a little while now, and I'm really excited that she's like getting more attention. And I feel like now with this book, we're kind of like, the pendulum is starting to swing back the other direction, where like now people are picking this up and they're being like, it was overhyped, I heard such amazing things and this wasn't that great. Which again, like, I get that. Like, this is another book that I can definitely see why people wouldn't like it, but I thought it explored themes so brilliantly. I really love how Moreno Garcia used horror elements to make commentary on social issues, which I think, even though I don't enjoy horror, was one of the reasons that I really liked this, because it wasn't just like for shock value or anything. It was actually used to contribute to the story in a really important way. I loved Noemi as a main character. I also just really love how she is so unashamedly feminine. I thought the characterization was good. I also, like, I know not everybody felt like the atmosphere was done very well. I thought it was, but yeah, I found this just like a really chilling, really effective book, and I am, yeah, like, this one did definitely live up to the hype for me. I know it hasn't for everybody, but I thought it was fantastic. Number 5, Happy Music, a book with some very beautiful and truly memorable quotes. So this one was pretty difficult because I'm not really a quotes person. I've said this before. I always want to be, but then I never want to like pull myself out of the story to like stop and write down a quotation that I think is great. So yeah, but then I regret this later when I am trying to think of a line that I really loved. And then sometimes I read a book that I love and there's like one quote that really sticks in my mind, but the other ones I can't remember. So this is one of the only books where I could remember like multiple quotes, and I think that the beautiful language is a real selling point on this book for me. And even with this one, I did have to like look up some of the quotes, but I'm gonna go with a very basic answer, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I just love the way Emily Bronte writes. I think that's one of the reasons that I can enjoy this book in spite of so many things about it that I don't like. because she just has this way of language where it's very beautiful, it's very descriptive, but it's descriptive of emotional things. So it's not just like page after page of like describing the setting, which is something I tend not to like. It's like really descriptive of like humanity and like people and like the way that people interact with each other. And I just really think this is gorgeous. And I did pull up a couple of quotes to share. These are all like very famous ones. So again, I said this answer was basic and I meant it, but just to share a few. Treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies. Time brought resignation and a melancholy sweeter than common joy. And like that, this is just like an example of how she can write things that are recognizable, because like I know what she means. Like it's hard to put it into words, but there's that feeling of peace that is tinged with a little sadness, but that is its own kind of happiness. Like I just feel like she really nailed that. And then one of the most famous quotes, and one of my favorites, "He shall never know I love him, and that not because he's handsome, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made out of, his and mine are the same." I just think that is one of the most gorgeous, evocative lines I have ever read. Because like what an image, like to have somebody who is more of yourself than you are, who is more like you than yourself. Like that's just, it sounds like a riddle, but like I can like understand that. I can picture what she means. And yeah, like I said, that's one of the reasons, this beautiful writing is one of the reasons why I think I overlook some of the things that I don't like about this book, because there are just some really beautiful or impressive things it does. And I will also say that even though Emily Bronte I don't think is deliberately romanticizing the relationship between Heathcliff and Cathy, and I really don't think you're supposed to see it as a romance, one thing that I find very impressive about it is that I do at least buy the idea. Like, not that this is a healthy romance or a desirable romance in any way, but I believe that these two people are so deeply important to each other that they will cause all of this plot to happen. Not that that's a happy thing, but it's kind of like the central premise of the story rests on you like buying into this idea, and I do. Number 6, Getting Older. A book that you read a long time ago, but you think you would appreciate more if you read it as a more mature reader. And this one was actually another one that was surprisingly tricky, because even though I do like to reread books, and I have actually returned to a few and enjoyed them more than I did previously, for the most part, I feel like I've been pretty good about like returning to those books recently. Like I've done this a few times recently and enjoyed the book a lot more than when I was a kid. And if I haven't done it with a book, it's usually because I didn't like it then and I don't think I'll like it now. But I did eventually think of a book that this applies to, and that is Princess Academy by Shannon Hale. I read this book a long time ago, and I just remember being pretty disappointed in it, or like I just remember not liking it that much. Like it was kind of fine. But I think now I would appreciate the themes a lot more. There's like some great female friendships in it, which is something I care very much about in the books I read. I think those are things that just I really, really seek out and love more as an adult. So that's another aspect. And I've also read a few other books by Shannon Hale more recently that I have really enjoyed. So I just feel like I think this book will land better for me now as an adult reader. So I do want to reread that at some point. And finally, number 7 is Sweet Birthday Memories, a book that kept you incredibly happy during a sad or demanding period of your life. And I have 2 answers for this. Both books I read last year, and they were actually both buddy reads. And the first one is A Mixture of Mischief by Anna Mariano. I buddy read this book with my friend Priscilla from Bookie Charm, and we both agreed that this was just such a lovely, warm, just uplifting book to read. During 2020, it was, I think, like March or April that we read this, and there was a lot of fear and stress and just there's a lot of grief. There was a lot of really hard things obviously last year, and this book was such a lovely thing to read at that time. Like just the way that Leo and her family love and support each other so much. The focus on baking magic was really like just very sweet. I really love that element. I also think the series does some really great work thematically. And yeah, this was just like such a cozy, warm hug of a book, and I'm so grateful that we read it at the time that we did. And then the other book I want to mention is actually a series, but that is the Lord of the Rings series. This is of course the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, and this was a buddy read with Vendi from Caught Between Pages, Katie at A Sea of Tomes, and Kelsey from Hardback Haven. And we all agreed this was just a really great series to read in 2020. A lot of the themes in this one about having hope when hope seems gone, and how ordinary people can be very brave. And just like really selfless love. Like I'm getting emotional just like thinking about this series and how much it meant to me, especially to read last year. So yeah, I'm gonna stop before I just get like completely overcome with feelings. I just did the Moody Reader book tag. I told you guys I am a crier. But yeah, like this is another series. I feel like I've said this a lot in this video, that it's not for everybody, and I really understand why it's not. It's very dense in places, it's very character focused, very slow, but just the characters and the relationships and the themes just resonate so strongly with me, and so much stronger as an adult. Like I read this as a kid and I vaguely remember enjoying them, and I've always read and of course I've always loved the movies, but it was not until returning to this series and finally finishing it last year that I really realized like, oh, this is a series that is going to just live in my heart and soul now. So yes, this book definitely kept me company. It comforted me during a really difficult year for all of us. Okay, so that was the birthday book tag. I actually should have mentioned that I wasn't officially tagged for this, but I kind of was, because Alan said in his video that he was tagging anyone who had an April birthday, which I do, so I was kind of tagged. And in that spirit, I'm going to tag anyone who has April or May birthdays who wants to do this, and specifically I'm going to tag Julia from Shakespeare and Such and Taylor from Page Screen Taylor, who are fellow April birthdays and my co-hosts for Past It Classics. I know that both of them, they have a lot going on, so they haven't been making videos recently, so if it's too much pressure, please don't worry about doing it. But if you are looking for a way to kind of jump back into BookTube, I would love to hear your answers to these questions. And of course I tag anybody else who wants to do this. Like, even if your birthday is not in April or May, I won't judge you. Do it anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!